30% believing that this is something that the district should implement. Tonight, what we have put together, honestly, is just basically the option of if the board were to make a decision on to move forward with start time. So we'll talk about three options: not to do anything, do 1920 or 1819. We did not spend a lot of time, and we do have the information as a part of this presentation talking about the challenges nor the benefits, because I think all of those things have been put forward. Around that, we do have the challenges ready to look at if there are those of you that have questions. Within the presentation, we are trying to address how it would look if we were to implement it over time, and then there weaved in an opportunity to get feedback and those kind of things to address the challenges and concerns that have been brought up through other districts' experiences, as well as what we've heard from our community. So that's the approach we took tonight, and I think we'll have enough time for questions if there are questions around either benefits or concerns, but we just actually have timelines and what we would suggest that we do. So Rick is going to lead that.
I'm Rick Henry, Director of High School Support, and just have some information to share with you tonight. As Anna said, basically a couple of different timelines if the board were to decide to move ahead with later start times for the high schools. As Anna mentioned, there are several possibilities that we're going to look at tonight. One is a possible implementation in 2019 and 20. Another one for 2018-19, which would be next school year, or the possibility of no change to our current schedule. I forgot to mention that there are some folks in the audience tonight who can answer questions that I may not have answers to as well, or provide input. The first one, possible 2019-2020 implementation guideline, and I just tried to go month by month. And if you have questions or comments as they come to mind, please share them. Don't think that you have to wait until the end. The next several months we could spend developing surveys, scheduling community meetings and parent meetings, staff meetings, student meetings, focus group meetings to share later start information and to gather input. As I did a little background reading on this process, I saw that the most successful initiatives such as this were ones that were given a lot of community input over a period of time. So that's why I think some time built in would be a positive. Also during these months, we could begin working with First Student to develop a potential transportation plan in terms of additional routes, additional buses and drivers, determining impact on pre-K through 8th grade transportation schedules, if that exists, and to also budget additional costs. Moving ahead to August and September of 2018, we would then conduct the surveys, community meetings, and so forth. Also making sure we remember LEA for some input. I thought the beginning of the school year seemed like a good time to gather this kind of input, because that's when parents tend to be most involved and accessible as they're starting their students in school and with different beginning of the school meetings. October of 2018, gathering and organizing all the input to present to the board, October 8th, and then a decision on October 22nd. November and December of 2018 could be spent, if passed by the board, the following could take place: communicating start time changes to all stakeholders that we engaged in the conversation, and also it would be this time it would be a good time to build changes into the 1920 student enrollment process, the master schedule, and the student information system. January and February, we could enroll students based on the later start time. March of 2019, we could staff our schedule based on student course requests. No, I'm sorry, too. I made copies and they didn't pass them on. I'm sorry. To the beginning of this slide, in January and February, enrolling students based on a later start time. In March, we could staff our schedule based on student course requests. Plan for implementation of transportation changes and continue to communicate changes to all stakeholders. April and May of 2019, we can continue to tweak the new schedule based on enrollment patterns and stakeholder input. And then in August, we would implement the later start schedule. Just a possible timeline. And have we thought of everything? No, I'm sure we have not, but trying to get a basic timeline in place or suggested.
So, Rick,
yeah.
I just want to say with this, one of the things, just preliminary feedback that we actually got, which is why our thought or recommendation would be 1920, is we heard from parents from both high schools that have concerns, and what we wouldn't want to do is to make the decision and then not being able to fully address those concerns. Another thing that our principals, and they can speak to that, have heard that there may be a huge increase in those who would enroll in 0 hours, and right now our staffing is not built that way to address that, so we just want to look at it and balance that so that if there are, if it's a large number, which we don't know because we haven't had a chance to explore that would move to 0 hour, we would have to work with staff and LEA to make sure that we can provide that opportunity to those students who wouldn't want that shift in that schedule. And we believe that is possible, but it would take some time to do that because students have already enrolled this year.
So, Rick, I have a question. And you mentioned, you touched on this, that districts that have done this successfully have spent about a year in planning. Are there examples that you looked at, like who would be kind of the most successful example for implementation that you were able to pull information from?
The one that I looked at the most was the Boston implementation. Obviously, a district much larger than ours. They spent 18 months in the process. I think, and I'm reading between the lines a little bit, but I think they started, and then without maybe being as transparent and communicative as possible, and they met parent and community resistance, and so they backed up, and then changed and communicated more. That's my understanding, but I mean, that's, again, reading between the lines a little bit. Yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned that that's a much larger district. You know, the districts that have done this that I'm familiar with, Seattle, a lot of the districts in Minnesota, I mean, they're much larger. And so it certainly makes sense that it would be a protracted process. And in a lot of those cases, they were actually making pretty significant moves also, like an hour difference or 45-minute difference. So, you know, I just want to put out there that we're talking about 2 schools, and we're talking about a 25-minute change. So I think the other districts are, I think that we can learn from them, but I do get a little concerned that they may be a little apples and oranges, okay. just to point out.
Sure, yeah, I get that.
So I have a question about that. So based upon what you looked at, and I'm assuming you have background material that's not presented in these slides, as Anna stated, is this really just 2 schools, or will this affect every school in the district?
It's possible that it could impact all levels, depending on the transportation plan. And, you know, there's things such as, what we don't know is how many parents rely on high school students to provide daycare or childcare for their younger students. I mean, those are things that we don't know that hopefully we would be able to discover during some community meeting, parent survey.
Was that the nature of some of the pushback that had already kind of started to filter up from the high school groups that?
The high school principals probably can speak more specifically to that. I know what I heard was more around students who have after-school activities been pushed back and losing academic time. I did not hear the concern about those students who provide, but we don't know because we didn't explore it, which is why we would want to explore it. Then I also want to note that when we talked to First Student, they said it's possible to do a second bus route. So from their preliminary, which they don't know, we haven't done it, they're not anticipating it impacting others as far as bus routes are concerned, because they just would run a different route.
But we can anticipate that it's going to affect families that have kids at multiple buildings.
Right, and that's what we haven't explored. But the part about the buses, that can happen and not change their schedules, but it may, but that's what we don't know definitely, which is why we would want to work through that so families can work through what their options are and make sure that they're aware of their options and those kind of things.
Another question that comes up for me is the assumption that we would move to 8:30, and I'm wondering, have there been discussions that this kind of survey community input process might change that assumption in some way? Like, maybe we would be talking about an even bigger shift depending on what the bus company says, or has that come up?
Well, what we specifically looked at was the 25-minute shift, because that was what was asked in the Patron Insight survey, and that is what we've worked with First Student on, is if school started at 8:30, the 25-minute shift specifically is what we looked at. We have not talked about, I think a couple of years ago, there was some talk about a bigger shift, but we have just focused on the 25-minute shift.
I'd like to see it 9:30 instead of 8:30, but I think the 8:30 is realistic. That's what we have, the survey data on, and that was informed by the recommendations by the Pediatrics Academy. So, or 9:30 or 10. I don't want to panic anybody out there. But because there actually are data that suggests that even those later start times have a bigger impact. But I think 8:30 is something that we thought was doable. That's my sense.
I think it's important to follow up on the feedback of the community. I mean, traditionally, high schools get out earlier than middle schools get out earlier than elementary schools too, whether or not, we don't have a number of families that need that, but to coordinate getting kids to school and getting homes back home, and that is a big question mark, I think. I mean, even though might not require it from the buses, I think it's kind of just the traditional setup of the different age groups. If you have multiple kids, you're not at home.
Would we get information on how that impacts? I know it's an outside of school situation, but how it impacts students' ability to work?
Right. Yeah, I think that would be part of the input that we would seek, and I think that you said you've heard of some.
Well, when I met with the student advisory group, and this was probably about a month ago, there were students who just gave insight on how it would benefit their family because their parents were dropping off multiple kids, and having the stagnant time would actually help their families. But there were definitely students who said, I'm just going to work later, stay up later. And we just didn't have a lot of time to work through like what that can look like, how does that change. So I like anything, there are both sides to it, but I think if we follow, so we've gotten information from Patron Insight and specifically around bond issues that said that it would be positive, but what we did between getting the information and actually putting it on the ballot, and that, I know it's a little different, but we did take the time to make sure that we educated and communicated around what it would look like before we did that. And so from my perspective, but you guys may know a little better, I think that we would at least want to do that with our community and stakeholders so that they would have time to ask questions and we can address the concerns. Because if we were to do it, we would want it to roll out smoothly and not have like negative feelings around it or having to undo something. And I'm not saying that, I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, but just following what we've done in the past with that kind of information, I think that would be important to do.
The next few slides provide a timeline for a possible 2018-19 implementation. See that in March of 2018, we would work to, and this slide is very similar to one that you've already seen. It's just more compacted process to developing the surveys and setting up community meetings and getting LEA input, talking to staff and students, focus groups, and then beginning to work with First Student to develop the plan. In April, we would actually, a month doesn't seem long enough, like a long time to gather all this information, but that would be our plan to conduct all the surveys and the meetings and to gather all the input that we could.
Rick, I'm sorry, could I interrupt you for just a second? You mentioned conducting surveys a couple of times. How are you envisioning that would be different than the survey we just fairly recently conducted?
I'm thinking that maybe some other stakeholder groups, we could focus on maybe students, talk to them. I'm not sure how much the Patron Insight focused on staff members.
Teachers, yeah.
So I guess I was just, and it doesn't have to be a survey, it can be meetings. I was just trying to think of
If I can also say that,
Sure.
I actually think I've talked to a lot of parents who didn't get the survey and didn't take the survey and didn't know this was really on our radar until the newspaper article came out. So I don't think that a survey that was really, I don't think it's a comprehensive survey for us to move ahead thinking that we have the full picture of what the community feels about it.
So when you do a survey of randomly selected people, how is that not comprehensive? I mean, this is the process we used with this group for the, for both of the bond issues, and you can assume, randomization takes care of a lot of issues. Sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, do you have? For the musical interlude. Do you have a specific reason to believe that this survey data are flawed in some way?
I think just as an employer, though, we need to.
No, but I
we
mean,
have a huge number of employees, and we need to make sure that they're educated and we're getting feedback from them. I mean, I don't know if the survey is the right.
Perfect
Yeah.
data. No, I don't. I think there's a lot of people that did not take the survey, were not asked, and their feedback was not part of that. And I understand where you're coming from the academic side of things, but I also look at that data, and it says that we have a very minute problem with hunger in this community that I don't believe is accurate in that exact same survey. So those same people answering those questions, in my opinion, are not actually representative of our entire community in that question. So now that's just my personal opinion. We're going to disagree clearly, and that's fine. But that's where I'm at with it. And I don't think that in any shape or form are we prepared to say okay, you've already enrolled and we're going to actually do all of these changes in the next 6 months so that we start at a different time in August?
So, if we throw out those data, because we don't believe them for whatever reason.
Didn't say we had to throw them out, Rick.
Well,
I actually believe them, and I
okay,
support the
okay,
other plan, right?
Okay, so,
Support continuing to look at it based upon the survey.
sure.
Right,
But
I don't think it's smart for us to do this in a speeded up time period that makes everybody rush through this, halts everything else that they have to do with their jobs, a brand new superintendent coming in who's gonna have to sort of suffer the consequences of whatever community pushback we get.
Right. So I guess my view is that I think if we do the right job of educating the community, I don't think we're going to get a lot of community pushback. And by the way, there is a staff online survey, so those data are available also, and they were the least enthusiastic, which doesn't surprise me. But even there, and again, for those of you who may not have been reading this as recently as I have, we give them two options to say no. Like, no, we don't want to make a change, and start times are not perfect, but it's too much of a hassle, so let's not make a change. Even there, that was 31%, and the rest of the people were in the other categories. So I think that I was surprised at how positive these results were. And if you look at the community survey, you look at the parent online survey, the results are really, really similar, which gives me some confidence that we actually, that this company that we paid a few $1,000s to actually did the right job. And we did this without any PR at all. I mean, there was nothing that we tried to educate the community, and it still came back with 43% in both the telephone survey and the online survey saying, this should be a priority for the school board.
Understood.
So I think, sorry, go ahead, Jill.
I do feel that we're a large employer, and we need to have more discussions with our employees about what works for them. Not only is it changing their schedule, it's changing their home lives. Many of them are not just employees, they're parents of students that attend schools other than the ones they work at. They're coaching after school, they're doing extracurricular sponsors, and their voice is important if we want to keep, one of our main concerns is keeping good teachers, and I think the communication is a really big part of that. Whatever the survey turned out, I'd really like to have much higher percentage number and more of a dialogue than the data we get personally. Because I've received a lot of feedback and worry because they're reading the paper and it's like, they're in the dark. So
I think I'm going to jump in and then. So I think that the survey data we got from Patron Insight was good for what it was, which was basically telling us that the community has an interest in us exploring this further. I think the value of doing some additional survey work and community and parent meetings is that the Patron Insight survey was, they called 400 people. It's, scientific, the results are valid, but they only talked to 400 people and not all of them were parents or staff people in our district. And so, from my perspective, if we're going to take on some change like this, I agree with Jill, there's a lot of impacts to a lot of people that are outside of just the kind of technical stuff about schedule changes and bus routes. It's a lot bigger than that. I really want them to have an opportunity to really have their say about it before we do it, because my fear would be that if we don't, we will end up like Boston the first time, because I've done a little bit of reading about the Boston situation, and it blew up in that school board's face. And I would rather that we take some very deliberate steps, we take our time to do this right, because at this point, the research is out there that says this is a good thing for students. We don't want to screw up implementing it by doing it the wrong way and not getting our community to come along with us and say, yes, after we've had a chance to hear what you have to say, after we've had a chance to give you our input, get our questions answered about how this is going to impact after-school jobs or childcare or staff additional assignments, then we can move forward and feel like, okay, we've kind of brought as many people along as we're going to be able to bring along and have it be a positive experience. And I have to echo Jessica's statement that I think the very last thing we want to do is to manage this process poorly and then have it dumped in the lap of our new superintendent. And I think that would be a really unfortunate thing to do for everybody involved. So that's where I am on I do think that the additional survey work and community meetings are really important.
I know you have some stuff to present, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
But, and I do think we have additional work to do. It's unfortunate that we didn't start doing some of this work before we did the survey. But I guess my view is that we still have time to do that work on a compressed basis. It's February, and so I think that we have time to do that. The North Kansas City School District just, less than 2 weeks ago, just voted to change their start times for next year. And they got pushback because they're actually doing it, I think, for the wrong reasons. But they changed all of their school start times, high school, middle school, and elementary school, and not for academic benefits, because that's what we're talking about here. And I think we should not lose sight of the fact that these are things that are going to be helpful for kids. And I think it's an equity issue, which I'm happy to speak to later. But so, there are models out there where people have done that. So I guess my view is, if we push ahead and we decide, okay, let's make this change next year, that gives us momentum. If we get down the road in April and May and it's becoming problematic, then there's nothing that prevents us from going back and say we're gonna delay the decision for a year. If we delay the decision for a year, my concern is something will happen and we'll wind up delaying it again. I don't think it's necessarily. It's in my view, it's you do this. You decide to do it next year, and that's the end of the story. I think you decide to do it next year. You work to make that happen, but with the idea that maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe there's not enough time. Maybe we find out there are problems we didn't anticipate. Because we've been talking about this for 3 years now, and so, and I know there is a reticence on the part of some staff members to do this, and I think that's the reason we haven't pursued it more seriously up until now.
My concern, sorry, March is Thursday. It's March.
Okay, it's March.
So the only thing I was going to say, the challenge from my perspective, Rick, with doing it this year is that there are a couple of other things that the same people who would be doing this, we wouldn't be able to give the attention to detail, like something else would have to give, curriculum or the recent safety issues that have come up. So we wouldn't be able to, I don't think, fairly do this without some pushback, or we won't be doing something else. That's next year, I think, I think what Rick Henry shared is we wouldn't wait until next year to start. We would be able to start some things this year to carry over into next year, but it will be a challenge, a great strain on the staff, given, and I'm just speaking personally for myself now, I'm currently serving in 2 roles. We've had some recent resignations that on the classified side and IT and professional development that other people are having to cover dual roles while we're trying to backfill. So to be fair to those that would be involved, would be my hesitant concern about trying to fully go in and try to implement it for next year. We're just short-staffed, honestly.
Yeah, that was, I wasn't trying to be sarcastic, but like March is Thursday, and we have spring break, and I think trying to condense all of that we have 3 weeks in March. So if we were going to try to do the steps for March that's there, we really only have 3 weeks, and I think that, and not including parent-teacher conference and for high school as well. I think we can definitely probably, like Shannon says, start that process. We can probably be able to utilize when parents come to parent-teacher conference to kind of promote that, hey, this survey is coming up. But I was also interested, I know you said North Kansas City did that. How long did they complete it in 3 months?
You know, that I don't know. I just know that they made the decision.
And we did reach out to them. They haven't gotten back to us as far, I mean, we reached out to North Kansas City, Boston, and Seattle, and unfortunately, we're not their priority. But we are reaching out just to glean from lessons learned, things that they have done. But North Kansas City, we do have some contacts. We just haven't been able to connect to the right people
gotten any
around
calls
start
back.
time.
And I think that's another important point, is that giving our staff some time to do that would give them time to really work on gathering some of that information, maybe from districts in times when they're not as busy in the school year, over the summer even, and help inform the way that we approach this. So, Rick, I know you had a couple more slides. Did you want to go through the rest of those, and then we can continue our discussion?
Sure. Again, we're on the 2018-19. I don't remember if I talked about May or not, but May 14th, present to the board, and decision would hopefully come May 29th. And then May, June, and July of 2018, if passed, the following would be necessary. We would need to communicate the decision, finalize transportation changes, and this next part I think would be a little bit tricky. Make changes to master class schedules, student schedules, handbooks, student information system, websites, bell systems, breakfast, lunch schedules. The student schedule probably concerns me more than anything, because if students all of a sudden have a choice for 0 hour at 7:30, and first hour at 8:30, then I would foresee the possibility of a lot of changes, and that would be something that, in talking to the principals, that would be something that would be a little difficult to work on.
Kelly, you have a question?
If we decided to do the, which is, it sounds like there's some leaning toward doing a longer analysis of the problem, or of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it possible that we could, and I don't want to add to this, and I know there might be a reason that I'm not aware of, having just been on the board for a short time, but I am aware that my junior high kid goes to school at 7. So I'm wondering, our middle school kid goes to school at 7. So if we were going to spend a year looking at the high school time, is there a benefit to looking at the middle school time as well, or is there something that would make us not want to look at that comprehensively as well?
Cost.
Cost. So the more you shift, and I think, and it was a couple of years ago, the cost came forward, which is how we got narrowly to high school, and the 25 minutes was the most efficient component.
Thank you. Actually, then I will just not ask you to pursue that again.
So if I could, I appreciate the possible increase in 0 hour classes, which I think is a good thing. I mean, certainly that there's an inequity in the high schools, and I think that might help with that. But it's also the case that if we made the change, and trust me, I know I'm not going to talk at least for my board colleagues into doing this year, but you could simply say that the 0 hours will happen the following year, and so that you would maybe close that off this year, and that's not optimal, but they're not going to get those this year anyway. So I just want to throw that out, is that there are potentially some ways to manage that particular aspect of it.
So let me so are you saying that if we did that, the 0 hours would remain the same, or they won't allow for 0 hours?
No, what I'm saying is that if we made the change this year, let's just say that the 0 hours was the only reason we couldn't make the change. Just assume that for a second. I think you could create a situation where we say, yes, we're still going to do 0 hours. They're going to be at 7:30. We're just not going to let other people enroll in them because the class schedules are already made. So those 0 hours aren't available this year. They'd be available next year. And I'm talking about additional 0-hour classes, not the ones that are already on the schedule or about to be scheduled. So you could do a situation where, again, you just say that, sorry, we just don't have, you may want to take them, we don't have them available this year. They'll be available next year. Does that help clarify somewhat?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, does anybody have any additional questions for Rick right now? Okay. I think it's probably appropriate to kind of get a sense of where everybody is on this at this point. We've had a lengthy discussion, had a chance to ask questions, hear what the staff recommendation is. If you have,
I've
kind of say where you are, so we can come to some consensus about what direction we want to give staff on this.
I think anything for change for the students, for their well-being is a great idea. I think implementing it on such a short and speedy process, I know as a teacher, that quick change is overwhelming, stressful, and we can't provide as much as we would like to, energy-wise, with our students with those changes. So I think it's a great idea, but I think we should take the longer process. Long story short.
Kelly?
I am in support of changing the start time. I'm most compelled by Anna's comment that staff is taxed and that other initiatives would be delayed. I really want to see the curriculum reviewed, or that process started. So for me, that would be my priority when you look at where some of the things you listed that you would have to delay. So I would prefer to see us review this over the course of the next year and implement it in 2019. But I really am supportive of implementing the change.
GR?
I would echo what they said. I think, Rick, I think you mentioned the concern about slating it for 19, that it would get lost. I think anything that we dropped now that we've already started would run that same risk. But I think that if we push forward and keep on top of it and start it now, we can. I think the survey results and this conversation proves that we have the momentum to move it forward. And I'm certainly am in support of the change and would certainly promise to be a continued voice of support and advocacy to keep it moving forward for updates and reviews on the timeline laid out here. But I would be in support of the longer approach.
Yeah, I think if I were forced to choose tonight, if we did it next year, I would just say no, I'm not interested in doing it. Because I think if you do something badly, it's worse than not doing it at all. I think, I want to do what's best for kids. I also want to make sure we really do what's best for families, and including our employees who are also parents and have families. I just want to make sure that it's something that that's helping them as well as our students, because I think it's very important to keep the good teachers that we have and be able to attract teachers. And we can only do that if we treat them like partners in this process. And I value their opinion. If it's something that's going to make it much harder for them to manage their families and their jobs, I would like to know that. So that's where I'm at.
I definitely think we need to spend a little more time doing the full investigation, so I'm supportive of the later start date.
And it won't be any surprise to anybody that I think that's the best way to handle this as well. So that's consensus.
Well, hold on.
Sure. Yeah.
So obviously my position is clear, and I think that there is information in the survey that actually speaks to some of the issues that we've talked about. But, I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of why this is important, right? So, and I'm going to, I apologize for doing this again, but, what the data show, improved academic performance, graduation rates, reduced tardies, absenteeism, even fewer sports injuries. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that I really do think this is an equity issue. I was actually just reading a study that just came out on racial and ethnic sleep disparities, which basically shows that, and I'll just read a little bit from the abstract, racial and ethnic minority children and adolescents are at increased risk of having shorter sleep duration and poorer sleep quality than their white peers. In this review, we critically examined and compared the results from 23 studies that have investigated racial ethnic sleep disparities in American school-age children and adolescents. We found that white youth generally had more sufficient sleep than minority youth. Hispanics had more than blacks, and there was inconclusive evidence for Asians and other minorities. So, when we talk about the academic benefits, I really do think this is an equity issue. I think we help some kids to be on more equal footing than is the case now. So, I guess that's the last thing I'll say. But I think that I'm disappointed that we're not going to move forward because I think we can. But I'm pleased with the fact. I think we should all be pleased with the fact that we're going to move forward on this. If I'm hearing what you all are saying.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I think the direction is start working on the 1920 implementation schedule that you've put together, and when you're ready to kind of come back with the next set of, okay, here's where we are, we'll do either a board report or a work session, depending on what staff recommends.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So we're concluded with that. At this time, I actually am going to make a motion to amend the agenda to add a second executive session on a personnel-related issue. So I'm making the motion first I have to make the motion to amend the agenda, and then I'm going to make the motion for the executive session. So I'm making the motion to amend the agenda to add that session after the work session, high school start time. Second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, so the motion, I move the Board of Education recess to executive session to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel in order to protect the privacy interests of the individuals to be discussed, with Anna Stubblefield, David Cunningham, Sammy Devon, and Jerry Kimball invited to be present, and with the board to return to open session in this room at 7 p.m. with possible action to follow.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And are we going to?
Yeah.
That room. Okay, we're going to our usual executive session room. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you. What you were talking about?
Order. Our first item on our regular business agenda is a special recognition of the Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year, Ruth Gathenguri, with Laura Wagner, Director of Operations, the Boys and Girls Club of Lawrence.
Hi, my name is Laura Wagner, and I'm the Director of Operations for our elementary programs, and I'm going to be introducing Ruth. Ruth is a junior at Free State High School, and she started attending Boys and Girls Club in elementary school, and I had the privilege of working with her during our summer programs. Throughout her years at the club, Ruth has participated in inter-club sports leagues, Smart Moves programs, and Torch Club community service projects. She also joined the club's inaugural Resist chapter to advocate to younger club members about the negative effects of tobacco. She has served as a volunteer and is now a group leader working at our Sunset Hill Elementary site. During her high school career, Ruth has been a member of the marching band, debate and forensics teams, student council, and the varsity swim team, as well as a board member for the clubs Can We Talk and Firebird to Firebird. She is also active in her youth group at church, where she has attended multiple mission trips and helps the homeless in her community. Ruth is our Lawrence Youth of the Year and will be competing for the state title next Wednesday in Topeka. She will be competing against 7 other candidates from across the state. So here's Ruth.
Growing up, I was literally the black sheep in the crowd. All my neighbors were white, and all my classmates were white. My first exposure to how insanely difficult it is to be a Black woman in America came at a very early age. When I was in preschool, I was so excited for my mom to come to my class to share our Kenyan culture with my friends. I thought this would be an opportunity for my friends to appreciate my heritage, but instead, the opposite happened. They made fun of me, and I was ashamed. I was picked on for my body, hair, personality, and everything that makes me, me. Once I arrived to middle school, things got even harder. Girls became so worried about what they looked like and what people thought of them. I found myself slipping into this trap too. Beauty standards we saw in mainstream media were something we were all chasing, but I realized I could never reach. This crushed my confidence. But luckily, I had the summer at Boys and Girls Club to rely on. I remember one of our group leaders, Miss Kit Kat, got all the girls together and handed us a piece of paper. She told us to write one thing that we loved about ourselves. I looked at that piece of paper for what seemed like forever. I couldn't think of anything. It wasn't until Miss Kit Kat was brave enough to share what she loved about herself that I saw something beautiful inside myself. My big hair, big smile, and big personality are what I love about myself. At the club, I found my inner beauty, and it began to shine on the outside. Today, my role has shifted from a club member being influenced to that of a mentor doing the influencing. When I was a kid, I always saw my group leaders as superheroes. They're able to have fun with us and guide us through adversities of life. Today, I wear my staff shirt like a cape, and with my superpowers of kindness, empathy, and positivity, I want to inspire all youth that no matter what size, shape, or color they are beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight. That was wonderful to hear about your experience, and we're very proud of you. Okay, the next item on our agenda tonight is the report of the President of the Board of Education. And to begin my report, I would like to ask everyone to recognize a moment of silence for the victims of the mass shooting at Parkland, Florida's Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Thank you. Leading from that, I want to share some thoughts about that event and school safety. 5 years ago, I sat in my car driving home to Lawrence and listening to the heartbreaking news of mass murder at Newton Elementary School. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm going to get through this without getting teared up. In that time that followed, I thought surely that tragedy was so horrible that our state and national leaders couldn't possibly ignore, taking reasonable steps to prevent such tragedies in the future. Yet here we are again, in the same place as we were then, with more lost lives of students and teachers. Sorry. I'll finish, I'm good. I'm profoundly saddened for the victims, the families, and the school communities affected by the Parkland tragedy. Moreover, I'm really appalled at the lack of leadership, compassion, and common sense from our congressman, the president, thank you, and from our new governor, just recently on Friday, around the real issues that have to be addressed to prevent these tragedies in the future. Our schools should not have to become armed fortresses in order to keep our students safe. We should never, never, ever expect our teachers to take on the additional responsibility of defending our students with firearms. There has to be another solution. Suggesting that arming our teachers will prevent school shootings is naive, it's simplistic, it flies in the face of data and of what trained security professionals know about crisis situations. We must take a stand for a multifaceted public policy solution that has to include a discussion about our gun laws. Since the Parkland tragedy, board officers have worked with our district administration to ensure that we are supporting our students and teachers who are moved to protest the current state of the nation on this issue. And I'm proud of our district for doing that because that's not true across the nation. We have also revisited our own security plans, and Dr. Stubblefield will speak to that further in a moment. I'm grateful to our community that has supported our capital plans since 2013, allowing us to have secure entries at all of our schools. We will continue to discuss how we can support our efforts to make our schools the safe and welcoming learning environments that our students and that our staff deserve. My apologies. In addition to that, I wanted to just address briefly some of the activities that I've engaged in since our last board meeting. I was pleased to attend the board lunch at Woodlawn, a little ray of sunshine here, on February 13th, and thank you to Principal Jeannie Friedel and her staff for sharing with us the things that are going on at their school. It was particularly fun to hear their fifth grade students who were singing and playing the ukulele, and to hear from our Horizon Award-winning kindergarten teacher, Brandon Daly, who teaches there. Jessica and I are continuing to communicate with Dr. Anthony Lewis regarding transition planning. We're currently working on plans to schedule a board retreat with Dr. Lewis, and we'll provide an update to the board as we progress in those discussions and have some firmer plans. I enjoyed attending a KU Law School Education Policy Symposium on February 16th, and I'm going to defer to Kelly to let her share some additional information about that event. The board's policy committee has met twice since our last meeting. We met on February 19th to review the feedback that we received from school teachers, PTOs, and the community on the draft fundraising policy that we've taken a look at. Based on that feedback, we're working on redrafting the policy, and we're going to provide that redraft to the board and the community for some more feedback. At this point, we anticipate that the redrafted policy won't be coming to the board for a first reading probably until the first April meeting to give us time to complete that process. We also met today and had a lengthy discussion about a set of policies that we have related to material distribution in schools, gifts and donations. They're all kind of related for various reasons, and the policy committee has not reviewed or updated those policies since before 2010, so we're taking a look at that. We're going to seek some advice from KASB on model policies in that area, and then look at redrafting our existing policies to comply with some best practices and also some consistency across those issues, especially as we're having this discussion about fundraising and that's, other related areas. So that's all I have this evening, so I will turn it over to Dr. Stubblefield for her report.
I can't. I can see. I don't need my glasses. Good evening. I just want to build off what Shannon said. I understand that school safety has been at the forefront of everyone's mind with the events on February 14th at Parkland, Florida, and my heart goes out to the entire school community of the Broward County, Florida. Student and staff safety is our primary focus every day, and I want to mention that I did send a letter to all of our parents and send some additional information, but since then, in addition to everything that was listed, here are some steps that we have proactively taken. Members of the district and high school administration met with Lawrence Police Department today to discuss strengthening our current crisis plan procedures. We recognize that some of those have not been updated, and we are going to do that in partnership with the Lawrence Police Department. District administrative team members are participating in additional active shooter training, and we'll be establishing a framework for training more staff, and they're attending that training within the next couple of weeks. We're exploring the possibility of contracting for additional security for our high schools and reviewing district-wide communication tools. And the district is reassembling the emergency operations planning team, which includes district staff as well as representatives of local law enforcement, emergency management, fire and medical service, and first student. So those are things that we're proactively doing, and I will be the first to say I apologize. Unfortunately, when tragedies happen, they make you look at how things are going, and I apologize for us being complacent with our current plans, and we'll do better. And although this is not an exhaustive list of what I've shared, and I understand that no matter how much we plan, we cannot prepare for every scenario, but we will do everything in our power to make sure that we keep all of our students safe. Shifting gears, we thank our Lawrence school community for its continued assistance and support, and we continue to be vigilant in our efforts to maintain school safety. Last week, about 500 of our high school students, small group of middle schoolers, and a few teachers participated in the national 17-minute school walkout in support of victims and survivors of Parkland, Florida, to protest gun violence. The district supports students and staff exercising their rights to free speech and peaceful assembly. Any absences associated with participation in these events will be excused. Last week was also challenging with 2 inclement weather days due to the ice storm Tuesday and forecasted freezing rain on Thursday. With 2 previous inclement weather days used on January 11th and 16th, our elementary and middle schools are still meeting the state requirements for the instructional minutes. Our high schools are about 20 to 25 minutes short, and we're working on a plan to make that up. School will be in session on April 20th, which was originally the inclement weather makeup day that the board approved as part of the school calendar. The state would then forgive us for a second day, and we will wait to see if there's any additional winter weather in the coming weeks before bringing the board a plan to make up the shortfall at the high school. So cross your fingers and hope for no more inclement weather days. We ask for patience and flexibility as our elementary teachers do their best to reschedule any parent-teacher conferences missed last week. They're going to work with their parents specifically to address any conferences that need to be made up and provide time for the parents to have time with them. The district is planning a new format for kindergarten roundup this year. All of our elementary schools will host parent enrollment nights in March to assist families with completing online registration forms and providing all of the necessary paperwork for enrollment. The elementary schools will then host a traditional kindergarten orientation, formerly called Roundup, in April and May. We invite families of children who will turn 5 on or before August 31st to contact the neighborhood school for more information, and the schools are also reaching out to families. Congratulations to all 14 of our National Merit semifinalists for advancing to finalist level of the scholarship competition. The Sunflower, also congratulations to the Sunflower Elementary Choir for its selection to perform at the Kansas Music Education Association Conference this past weekend, and all of our student musicians who were picked to perform with honor bands and choirs, and all the student athletes competing at the state level on last weekend. I understand 2 of our wrestlers, 1 from each high school, placed 3rd at state this past weekend. We have 3 weeks remaining until spring break and a lot of teaching and learning to accomplish in these days. Also, I want to say Dr. Anthony Lewis spent the day with me today and several others as we plan to. He also plans to be in the district on a few other occasions, and we got a lot accomplished. He also got an opportunity to meet the finalists for the New York Elementary principal position, and he spent the afternoon with our almost 2 hours with our staff of color, and he's set up to meet with several other groups when he returns in about a week. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on now to our patron commentary, and we have several tonight that relate to an item that's on the agenda, but we have one that is not, so we will do that now. Lori Folsom with the LEA, and before we get started, I'm going to read the audience participation guidelines pursuant to Board Policy BCBI. The USD 497 Board of Education welcomes patron comments and thanks you for taking time to talk to us about our policies and procedures. We set aside this time during our regular meetings to hear from the public. This is your time to share your opinions. However, complaints about specific staff or students will be heard by the board in executive session in order to protect the privacy of the individuals to be discussed. While you are not required to share your contact information, we ask that for that information so district staff or the board can follow up with any specific concerns you have. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes, and thank you. Okay.
Thank you for the time to address you all tonight. I have some prepared statements. KNEA is really good about giving us message and everything, but I wanted to start out with a few personal remarks. In class today, I had students who said they were, they'd never known a time when they had not had a school shooting to talk about. And I think to recognize that when we were all in school, not all of us, but the majority of us were in school, we didn't have to have crisis drills and think about how vulnerable you are in your classroom where you're supposed to feel safe. I started teaching in 1997, and there were school shootings before Columbine, but Columbine was the first that I remember happening in my career. And I taught up the road in a different school district. And the reaction that that school district had to that tragedy was the first in-service that we had immediately following that. They had 3 social studies teachers bring in their collection of firearms and teach us how to identify weapons, how to potentially take a weapon away from a shooter, and how to take ammunition out of those weapons. I would like to contrast that with the communication that I started having with our district administration this last week about how we were going to react as a school community. I am so glad to say there are no in-services planned on how to disarm weapons. So, some of this that I'm going to read tonight, we altered in our LEA exec board meeting this evening because it doesn't apply to Lawrence, thank God. So, prepared remarks will be appreciated right now. Kansas NEA and Lawrence Education Association have long stood for safe, gun-free schools. Tragic events where the lives of students and teachers are being taken as a result of gun violence are unacceptable. Sadly, our elected leaders have made a clear choice to ignore the reality our students and education professionals face. As students have witnessed yet another incident of murder on a school campus at the hands of a gunman. They've organized a movement to bring the issue into sharp focus, calling for leaders to enact laws to protect them against further gun violence. This, in the most genuine sense, is a teachable moment. We appreciate our school board and our district administration, our building administration, who are standing in solidarity with educators and students on this issue, and that recognize that students are no longer willing to be victims of violence. Teachers should not have to consider shielding students from bullets to be a part of a new normal. Parents shouldn't have to confront the idea of sending their child to school with a Kevlar backpack to keep them safe. We look for our school administrators to support all students and all educators about their choice to participate or not participate in these events. We must all recognize that from Columbine to Sandy Hook to Parkland and for too many other schools across the nation, we conclude that enough is enough and the time for inaction is over. Throughout America, students are leading on an issue where the adults have failed. We must empower them and honor their commitment to civic engagement at this critical time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, next up, board commentary. Jessica.
So we did have an equity meeting last week, and a couple things happened at that meeting. One, we got an overview of CI3T from Leah Wisdom that I think was helpful for just context. But we also discussed the South name change, which we'll discuss here tonight, and the advisory committee did come up and vote on a recommendation, which I think Annette is here to, are you going to speak to that recommendation? Okay, so we'll hear that exactly a little bit later. So I just wanted to say that. And then also, thank you, Lori. I have you on my list to thank before you got up here. But, you know, this last week has been pretty terrible for everybody. And we have had a lot of conversation with not just Anna, but several district leaders, and Lori was definitely in that mix where we were talking about how do we best address this and get that message out as quickly as we possibly can, that we support our students and our staff in participating in these protests for their own healing and for their own anger and anything else that they need to express while they are dealing with these really complex issues. And also, I just want to kind of go on record. I've heard from several teachers also just this really complex emotion. I think that there's this expectation now that teachers will just throw themselves in front of a spray of bullets, and I don't think that that's really fair for us as a culture to have sort of decided that even though I believe that teachers in mass will step in front of the most jerky kid in school, and in that context, that should not be an expectation that we have of our teachers, because they have their own families and their own children. And so I just think that it's important to recognize that, no, we shouldn't be expecting that they take guns to fight somebody that comes in with a gun. That's nonsense. That said, I just wanted to thank the LEA for being such a great partner with the district as we kind of went through that this week.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to echo that. And I'd also like to thank Shannon for, I think, expressing the things that we all think and feel. So thank you.
Kelly?
Shannon mentioned, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit and just tell you that Shannon and I had an opportunity to attend the KU Law School's Journal of Law and Public Policy 2018 Symposium on Public Education Policy in the 21st Century. The symposium addressed the role of the importance of public education, culture, and looked also at economic implications for public policy as it relates through looking at it through the lens of the law. And I have to say, we had the opportunity to hear lawyers who both have participated in the Gannon case, and I left proud of the Kansas courts for taking up this issue in a way that other states have not. I left very firmly in the camp of we need more funding for public schools. And additionally, we got to see data presented that was specific to Kansas on education funding and achievement in Kansas. It looked at data from 2009 through 13. And there was a clear association that when you reduce public funding to schools, students from marginalized population disproportionately suffer. So as we continue in our equity work as board members, I think we're called upon to continue to advocate for, at the state level, for policies that support funding here in Lawrence and across the state.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. Okay, with that, we'll move on to our consent agenda this evening. Consent agenda items are those that are considered routine and are adopted by one motion unless any board member or the superintendent requests that an item be removed. The item or items removed are voted on separately. And before we have our motion, I believe we have retirements to recognize. Jessica.
We have 2 retirements. Sherilyn Isbell, who was a para in our district for 8 years, and Carolyn McGruder, who worked in food services for 23 years. So thank you for your service.
Oh, there's a third. There's a third.
Cheryl Kessler, who was an administrative assistant for 18 years.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I think we are ready for a motion.
We approve the consent agenda.
Second. All right.
Kimball?
Yes.
Beeson?
Yes.
Picture?
Yes.
Gordon Ross?
Yes.
Ingram?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is a report and approval of, regarding this South name change proposal with Jennifer Atokney, our coordinator of Native American Student Services, and Carol Cadu Blackwood, a community member.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for having us here tonight, and thank you, everybody who showed up to support the name change. Thank you all.
Wicca. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'd like to acknowledge the elders in the room and thank you for letting us speak. Okay. The working group was asked to narrow down the name changes choices to 2 names, one of which should be a non-named person name. Our session lasted about 1 hour and 45 minutes on December 12th in the Centennial Building. This meeting was publicized in the Lawrence Journal World as well as the Native American Student Services Facebook page. I would like to share some of the highlights or points that the group formed, discussed, and shared. For the sake of time and sanity, I will not go over the whole hour, 45 minutes of the meeting, nor perform an exacting exegesis of our deliberations. Okay, some of the information about the loss of tribal language and how this loss stems from the boarding school system of which Haskell is a part of. That was a big part of the discussion. This discussion was in response to a non-native's request to have the school named for something that translated from a local tribe that represented the word gift or education. This discussion led to that there's no universal indigenous language that can be used instead of picking one tribe's language to be used, thus alienating all the other tribes in the area or from the area. In fact, the only universal word that we discussed that fits every tribe and nation on Turtle Island was genocide. That's a joke. Okay. Okay. This led to a discussion that verified what I had heard in many one-on-one conversations with parents about what I would like to call pan-Indianism, or the tendency to see all tribes and nations as one homogeneous group. So this part of our conversation led to a decision about that sort of generic name that was suggested, like Southwind or Arrowhead, that would not be appropriate. As for our 2 names, we really didn't follow the instructions, I think, because the instructions were rooted in whiteness and colonial power constructs. This is revealed by the idea that even words like Arrowhead and Southwind were even considered as possibilities. Our 2 choices actually are, number 1, Billy Mills Middle School, and number 2, Billy Mills South Middle School. Please understand me. Our actual choice is Billy Mills Middle School. However, we offer Billy Mills South Middle School as a second option. Our first choice does not include South in the name. The group came to the conclusion that to only have Billy Mills as the name strengthens the purpose of honoring a Native American person as a recognition of honoring Indigenous people. Excuse me. This intentionally shares his story as an integral part of Lawrence's history. Therefore, to have Billy Mills South lessens this intent of this action. However, concepts like compromise, power, whiteness, indigeneity, community, and unity also all come into play. We understand with our heads why Billy Mills South will probably be the name that you guys pick, but we understand with our hearts that Billy Mills Middle School is the name we prefer. Thank you. Ada Miigwech.
Board members, questions for Jennifer?
And we have letters and stuff from Mr. Mills saying that he's cool with everything, so we can.
He's actually watching this live, so we're so excited.
So, thank you.
Hi, Billy.
I was just concerned because the agenda says something different.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The board enclosure. Right.
That was what was given to us on Friday when we asked for the what was being recommended.
Okay, okay. Other questions? We can, sure, please, thank you.
I apologize. When Dr. Stubblefield called me about sending that, and I was confused about what I needed to do about including the narrative or just the names and things like that. I've also been recovering from 2 rounds of strep and a tooth and a cold. I had a tooth pulled. It was crazy. This month's been crazy. Okay. So I apologize. I should have said the 2 names. I meant to say the 2 names when you called me about getting that on the agenda. So that's my fault. I should have included that in when she called to ask that final decision, whatever, but I was a little whacked out.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that explanation. Okay, so we can do a couple things. We can have some discussion first, or I can go through we have a number of people in the audience that want to provide some comment. We can do that and then have discussion afterward.
Let's hear what people have to say.
Yeah, okay.
I would like
All
to.
right. All right, so I'm going to go through these just in the order that they were brought up. So first, Steve Cadu.
My name is Steve Cadu, and I'm a resident of the city of Lawrence, the community. I first want to thank the board for offering the opportunity to provide a moment of silence for the tragedy in Parkland, Florida. I would only like to add to that reflection of all the moment of silence. I'm sure there were many, many heartfelt thoughts in that moment of silence by all of us. But I would like to add to that reflection that we find a solution for the horrible damage we all face in this violence. We are coming to a close of February, Black History Month, and I believe it is fitting we are proposing a school name change for a person of color. And I want to read the quote of Billy Mills, a quote. Of course, there's many quotes when you do the research. But this particular quote I want to provide in my record of tonight. Quote, "What I took from the Olympic Games was not winning an Olympic gold medal, but an understanding of global unity through dignity of character and pride of global diversity. And global unity through global diversity is also the future of mankind," unquote. Billy Mills. And with that, I now place the name of Billy Mills Middle School for your consideration and approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cadu. Our next speaker is Larry Fry.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for the work that you do. My wife and I retired 2 years ago and moved back to Lawrence. That's where we wanted to be, and that's where we needed to be. We wanted to be a little closer to family, but we also wanted to enjoy the benefits of being around KU, where we had attended, and Haskell, Osher, and other opportunities. The choice that we had was where in the community we wanted to live. And we found our ideal house and neighborhood close to the middle school that we're talking about. And we had hoped that our diversity in our neighborhood would be something that we could enjoy as well. Well, did we ever luck out? We have a Hindu family, we have Native American families, we have a Black, and it's a joy to be in a place to celebrate that diversity. Our block party, I'd have to check with them, but I'd like to invite you all to one of our block parties. You would enjoy it, but I better check with them. But one thing I wanted to say, and that is the name Billy Mills prompts into our head memories of thrilling victories in the Olympics at KU. I think there were some national championships, and those kinds of things would inspire all kids to become the very best they could be. And that name has a power that transcends and includes all of us. So, you know, Lawrence, of any community, ought to be the place where we celebrate diversity, all nations, ages, races. We ought to be together, and we ought to be doing it right. And thank you for letting me. I am in favor of that name change to Billy Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Our next commenter, Elise Towie. Thank you very much.
Paso, my name is Elise Towie. I'm a member of the Iowa Tribe of Kansas, Nebraska, and the Menominee Nation. I am a Haskell alumni, I'm a KU alumni, and I presently work at Haskell, but I only represent myself. And that's one thing that I want to really bring to the table, is I know that there were some emails that were sent and mentioned about that there were people that, you know, weren't very happy with the name being changed, and that they were indigenous people that sent these. I want to remind you that they were speaking only for themselves. They weren't speaking for the Native American community, because we cannot do that. We have to speak for ourselves. I thank you for also saying that about the recent tragedy. My son is 15 years old and goes to Lawrence High. On the way to school, I told him, I said, there's going to be a walkout today, and here's how I want you to act. You know, I don't want you to be running around like a clown boy, you know, thinking it's something fun. This is very serious, and this is in memory of these people who have been shot on a school campus. So during that walkout, I texted him, and I said, I hope you're behaving. And he texted me back, he said, I didn't do it because I'm in my favorite class with my favorite teacher. You know, and to me, that was, spoke a lot about the quality of teachers that we have in our school system. He came up through Cordley, he went to South Middle School, he now goes to Lawrence High, and hopefully he'll be going to Haskell in a couple of years. But, you know, when he went to South, you know, we had awesome teachers. They're still there, you know, so it's nothing bad about, you know, this difference in opinion. I've really thought about this a lot because I was ready to come up here and just rage and reiterate what I said last time, and then I realized that I didn't have to, because it's all been said already. You know, the decision may have already been made, and I hope if it has been made, you know, I know that it's been done with your hearts, you know, with everybody trying to balance it out. You know, it's sort of like you're King Solomon, and you have that baby, and you have to decide how to divide it, because not everybody's going to be happy with that division, right? But if my Uncle Billy is watching, I'm just kidding. You know, I want to just say that, you know, the name Billy Mills brings up much more than an Olympic winner, an Olympic gold medalist. He is more than that. He is a Haskell graduate. He is a KU graduate. He is a Marine, you know. He now spends his time, he and his wife, traveling the country to bring good words to our young people. And to me, that's the most important thing that he's done in his life right now. You know, is to bring those, because I think our children need those words. They need to be propped up. They need to be, you know, held up to let them know how important they are. So that comes back around to being Indigenous. You know, with me, it's the name change is all about helping our Indigenous students feel like they have a place in this school system. Feeling that when it's November, it's not just Native American Minute, as I sort of joke about all the time, you know, that it is actually a full month full of activities. You know, and activities not that, you know, Geronimo did this or so-and-so did this, but people like Billy Mills did this. People like Jennifer Atokney, Carol Cadu Blackwood did this. Mr. Cadu did this. You know, that we have all these Native people, Lori Ramirez, you know, Mr. Stumbling Bear back there, you know, et cetera. We have all these Native people that are here because it's so important to us, not just because we want to do a name change to cram it down your throat. It's because we are so invested in our children being alive. Native children kill themselves at a higher average than any other child in this nation. So if we empower our children, maybe we will lessen those numbers in our community. Maybe we will empower our children so that they can continue on in high school, that they can continue on in college, because that's another statistic, is that our children do not graduate. You know, on mass levels, they don't graduate. And so we want to make sure that this empowerment, that this love of themselves as Native children, as Native people, shines through. And I think by changing this name of South to Billy Mills Middle School, I think that will have a really definite impact on them and their psyche. Thank you.
Dustin Stumbling Bear.
Hello, brothers and sisters. Thank you for allowing us all to speak. I kind of want to start off my story by letting you know our full family name, Se'emgia. This means to move a bear with force. When we were colonized, the way the U.S. cavalry beat us was not in battle. They surrounded us and killed our horses at night, 1,600 horses massacred. And then they threatened to open cannons on us if we didn't surrender. They brought us to a reservation in Oklahoma, and they used other tribes to interpret our names, and we were given Stumbling Bear. And our namesake, Stumbling Bear, chose to keep that, knowing it was a slight, because the option that was given to him other than that was Smith or Johnson. So we keep that name. We honor it by wearing it, even though we know it was a slight. Sister Atokney here brought up the fact that Haskell was one of the boarding schools. If you ever go out there and you see that cemetery, those are children. Those children are still out there. There are unmarked graves on that campus of children who were taken from their families and were not allowed to return. They were not given back to their families when they passed away, and they still sit on those grounds. Strong Sister Atokney, again, she talked about how she had strep, tooth, all that. And to me, I just thought she had a bad day, sore throat. That's how strong our Native women really are. You hear multiple people from multiple tribes coming up here. I'm from the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma, and I support Billy Mills, a Lakota. Think about that. Those were our enemies. And I'm willing to say this man can represent us and does represent us. Went to Haskell, alum of KU, Marine Corps captain, Olympic gold medalist. Everything we strive to be in our society, he encapsulates it all. And here we are asking you again, a panel made up from the idea taken from Native tribes. Think about that. We have to come before you once again to justify our place in this society. We have to turn the negative into positive over and over again. She shared the high suicide rate. So when we have a student graduate from high school, you better believe the tribe comes together and celebrate that. When one of them graduates from college, well, that's a powwow, and that's not a joke. We have to turn, that was actually my joke I made at that about genocide. And all us natives joked, because we get it. But you're all dead silent because you don't know the pain. We live with it every day. We teach our children. This is how we know the world. We live looking back, seeing constant colonialism, constant degradation of our culture. Why I say these things? Billy Mills South is another slap in the face, another mitigation to us as a people. You have multiple tribes here saying Billy Mills Middle School is the right thing to do, not the white thing to do. So do the right thing. Honor all of us. We are a part of your community here. I think those that have spoken so far, we have established that we are dedicated to this community. I lost an election not too long ago, and you see me back in the fray because I love Lawrence. I love all the children here. I see them walking to school because I literally live right across the street, so I see them walking to Pinckney from my area. I see them walking to the school bus or the bus stop for KU. We are a part of this society. We are part of this community. Do not mitigate us with one word, and you will do that if you go through with Billy Mills South. You are once again saying natives can only participate so long as what we allow them to do. We're here. We're fighting. In fact, in the military, per capita, no group serves in the United States military higher than Native Americans. We have some of the most decorated in the history of the United States military. I myself hold 14 different awards in 6 years of service. You see those generals on TV, they wear as many as I do. We fight for our country, we fight for our communities, and we aren't going to stop. Please respect us. Please acknowledge that we are a part of this society in full, not in part. I thank you for your time.
Our next comment, and I apologize if I don't get this. I'm not sure if it says Bern or Bernie. Kish, thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to comment upon and lend my support to the naming of South Middle School in honor of Mr. Billy Mills, former Haskell and KU athlete and a distinguished member of the Oglala Lakota Sioux tribe. I'm Bernie Kish, a lecturer in sport management program at the University of Kansas. The Lawrence School Board has been presented with a unique and wonderful opportunity. That is to name one of our middle schools in honor of a Native American, a giant of a man who was an everyday presence in our community from the mid-1950s until the mid-1960s, a man who brought unprecedented recognition to Lawrence with his stellar performance in long-distance running, a proud tradition of the Native American peoples, and continues to do so with his commitment through his foundation to make life better for those less fortunate than us gathered in this room tonight. We have talked a lot about Billy Mills over the past few months. However, few of us have been in his presence or heard him inspire others, particularly the youth of America, yes, middle school kids, like those who have attended, who will attend, and who currently are attending South Middle School. I have now for you a short video of Mr. Billy Mills talking about his early life, his time in Lawrence, and his present-day beliefs and actions. I submit that he is a man who has earned your affirmative vote to change the name of South Middle School. Julie.
It's actually the second largest land-based reservation in America, the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And my mom died as I turned 8, and my dad when I was 12. And I really never knew the poverty I came from, because there were such beautiful virtues and values that a grandfather, my dad, would bestow upon us. And once when my dad died, when I turned 12, then the entire world just crumbled. I went into fairly deep poverty, and then of course, At that point, it was 2 years later getting ready for high school and came to Lawrence, Kansas, Haskell Indian School. But on the reservation, I grew up, I'm half Indian, half white. And to this day, I've never, ever met a, quote, white relative. All my relatives are Native American, from half more toward the full-blood side. So I grew up fairly much into the traditional culture, the sweats, attending the powwows. I've never gone through the Sundance, but was well aware of the Sundance. And my heroes were Native American people of the past and a couple of Native American athletes. After my mom died, my dad and I were fishing. And this ultimately was over a period of time, but I'll put it into one story. And also some other people became involved and that helped. But I'll tell it all to my dad because I just kind of felt like the Creator put my dad in this position to teach me. My mom died, we're fishing, and of course I'm still mourning. And he reached and he hugged me. He squeezed me, stroked my shoulder, and said, "Son, you have broken wings." And then I started crying. And he took a stick and just worked through the hard pan, the path, the vegetation till the soil was all fluffed up. And step inside of the circle, son. So I stepped inside. And he said, "Close your eyes." Then he said, "Look inside of your heart, your body, your mind, your spirit, your soul. What do you find?" I can't respond. Boom. He clapped his hands. "I'll tell you what you find. Anger. You just lost your mom. Hate, because people have expressed hatred toward us. And you have a whole lot of jealousy, because we don't have anything of material value." Then he said, "But the jealousy blinds you. You don't see the virtues and the values of our culture, the virtues and the values of humanity." And he said, "You have a whole lot of self-pity. All of those emotions will destroy you." He said, "You've got to look deeper, and way, way down deeper where the dreams lie. You've got to find the dream, son." And he said, "It's the pursuit of the dream that heals you." And then he started giving me, over the period of years, little quotes signed anonymous on how dreams come true. But he said, "You've got to find the dream. You look so deep to find the dream, something miraculous happens. You get to know yourself." And then he went on to say, if you ever find the dream, the passion that the dream has, it leads you down a path to a destiny. Ultimately, you'll understand what I'm trying to teach you. You'll have wings of an eagle. Well, he died. I'm at the University of Kansas, and I broke. Emotionally, I just broke. The third year, I made All-American in cross country, and I'm asked to get out of the photo. But I was asked the first year and the second year. And they said, "We'll take a photo with you and one without you." I stayed and forced the photo, but I broke. I go to my hotel room, open the window. I'm on a chair. I'm leaning out the window, and I'm just rocking back and forth and just let go. It'll all be over. I heard, not through my ears, but underneath my skin, my whole body, a very soothing, very, very comfortable, but yet very firm, "Don't." And it was like my dad. I got off the chair. First time I wrote gold medal, 10,000-meter run. Believe, 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 believe. Come off the curve in Tokyo, Japan, years later, 26 years old, college graduate, officer in the Marine Corps, trying to get back into first place, 300 meters to go. Clark pushes me, Gamodi pushes me. I stumble. They're now 15 yards ahead of me. I'm trying to catch them, just one more try. Coming off the curve, the German, I think Lutz Philipp, the German national champion, saw me coming. He moved into the 5th lane. I'm running wide on the curve. The 4th lane is open for me. Just one more try. As I go by the German, I glanced, and in the center of his jersey is an eagle. It was the most empowering moment of my sports career and almost of my life. Very spiritual for me. It was back to my dad, wings of an eagle. I can win, I can win, I can win. Then you feel the tape broken across your chest. So in an essence, he saved my life, and he gave me a little philosophy simply on how dreams come true. I've had a beautiful journey. Being orphaned, growing up in poverty, that they were challenging, but today the journey, and I'm so blessed. Today I just want to take the stories my dad shared with me, and I want to pass them on to my grandchildren. And just recently I gave my gold medal. I gave my gold medal away. But I gave my gold medal away to Dominic, my youngest grandson. He was born at 31 weeks and was in the incubator and fed through the umbilical cord. So when you're fed through the umbilical cord, then we're told the muscles for speech and the mechanism is not developed. So you have to learn how to speak. So little Dominic is learning how to speak. And he's going to be fine. He's 31 months old now, but he's speaking at about a 15 to 18-month-old. But he's catching up. I went over to see him, and he was sitting in the corner, and he was preparing to say, Papa. But he loses the voice, Papa. So the therapy, they had my daughter work with little Dominic. He had his arm, and he'd hit his arm, Papa, Papa. I walked in, and he's preparing to greet me. I started crying. I saw a little warrior. I saw a warrior that assuming responsibility with a humility. The warrior using the four most powerful virtues, bravery, fortitude, and going to the center of his soul as a little 30-month-old to find wisdom to make the right choices for himself. And I thought, wow, there's a emerging elite warrior. The tribe made me a warrior when I won my gold medal. So now I want to pass the gold medal on to emerging elite warrior. So I gave it to my little grandson, Dominic. And I'm so blessed that I can take the stories that my dad shared with me and other elders and people from throughout the world and pass them on to my children and grandchildren.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Kish. Our next speaker, Annette Dabney.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Annette Dabney. I'm one of the co-chairs for the district's Equity Advisory Council. The Equity Advisory Council voted to support the name change as proposed by the Native American Student Services and the Native American Student Services Parent Advisory Group. We feel that it is so important for our community to have a better awareness and understanding of the many contributions made by the Native American community in Lawrence. We also feel it is important to honor those contributions and the significant human worth of an Indigenous people. This whole process of changing the name of South Middle School has been an opportunity for our community to learn and grow. For example, many of us have learned about the Native American tradition of honoring individuals while they are still alive. This process and community effort makes me very proud of Lawrence and my multiracial heritage, which includes Native heritage. Thank you.
Thank you. Austin Turney. And while Mr. Turney is coming up to the podium, I would like to wish him a very happy birthday yesterday. This evening.
Yes, I never expected to be addressing the board when I was 89 years old. But I am a former board member, and I've realized that I've been waiting for this since we named Langston Hughes. And in order to make this change substantial, I hope and recommend that in a central location in the building, a commemoration to Mr. Mills be erected. And I believe that there are persons in the Haskell community and Mr. Mills himself will be proud to participate in the design and construction of a commemoration. And I also believe that private funds would be obtained so it wouldn't require public funds to do this. So I look forward to seeing Billy Mills Middle School on the building.
Stanley Hayden.
My name is Stanley Hayden, and I thank you for this opportunity. I'm not an Indian, but I've studied their culture and their history most of my life. And as far as I'm concerned, they're the most prosecuted people in this United States. And they're asking for one thing from this school board: the name of school, Billy Mills Middle School. Not Billy Mills South, but Billy Mills Middle School. That is what the committee recommended to you. And I need somebody to explain to me why it's so important to keep South in that name. But I suppose nobody will. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the opportunity to let me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Hayden. Shelley Bointy.
Good evening. I prepared something to read. Mutakiapi, Chanzepiki, Chakfewi, Hashichu Chanzepiki, Shelley Bointy. This is Michunchki Shelby. We call her Shunkawakanwi. That's her kid name because she's always been like a horse. And so she's Horse Girl. I have been a Lawrence resident for 20 years, and I'm a KU graduate. I have a BA in psychology from KU and an MSW from KU. I work in the Lawrence Public Schools as a therapist for the RAP program. I have 2 children who we chose to have attend Lawrence Public Schools. I attended 12 years of parochial school, so I was leaning that route when my kids got to school age. But my husband is a big believer in public education, and so we went that route. And I've been very happy with the quality of education that my children have received. I have a 6th grader and I have an 8th grader, and they're both students at South. South Middle School has a history of hiring people of color as its building principals. I've had the privilege of working for Dr. Russell Blackbird from the Omaha Nation after he retired as South's principal, and he became the Dean of Education at Haskell Indian Nations University. He was the best supervisor I have ever had in my entire working career. My oldest daughter had the privilege of being a student when Dr. Jennifer Besselo, a Latina woman, was South's principal, and she also had the unique experience of working for Haskell as their cheer coach during her college years. She was a wonderful administrator, and I continue to have a great relationship with her. With South having a history of administrators who are people of color and have ties to Haskell, I never imagined how difficult it would be to generate support from the South community for a change in name from a direction to a name that honors a high-achieving Oglala Lakota Olympic athlete who has strong ties to Haskell, KU, and the Lawrence community. My daughters tell me how their peers have no idea who Billy Mills is. They told me today how they feel their peers are already making fun of the name Billy Mills Middle School, how their existence as first people of this continent is relegated to the distant past in the state history curriculum. I think about those things, and I remember how my youngest daughter in elementary school had to do a report on a famous Kansan, and she chose Billy Mills. And I remember how proud they were to meet him at Haskell during one of his many visits to Lawrence. He is a role model who has made history in our lifetime. He is a current, living, relevant, and vibrant representation of our people that our children can see and know and feel pride in themselves for being a descendant of the first people of this continent. I've sat in the site council meetings at South, and I have heard the resistance to changing the name to honor one of our own. I think the argument I heard the most during those meetings was, I think the majority should decide. That way the change is something that is decided by the community instead of being forced upon us. I want to leave you with this thought. If positive change in this country depended on the majority agreeing to it, instead of it being moved forward in the best interest of marginalized people, then the 7 women out of the 10 people sitting here in front of me still wouldn't have the right to vote. People of color would still be attending desegregated schools. And my family, people from the Fort Peck, Assiniboine, and Sioux tribes of Montana, the Little Traverse Bay Band of Ottawa Indians, the Kiowa Nation of Oklahoma, and the Comanche Nation of Oklahoma would still not be U.S. citizens.
Thank you, Ms. Markey.
Will Averill?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you all. Very, very much appreciate you taking the time to have this public comment and talk about this important issue. I really feel like there is not a lot I can say that hasn't been said with so much passion and so much importance already, but I do feel that it is important to say that as someone who has grown up in Lawrence as a member of the Lawrence School District, I went to Woodlawn and then Central and then Lawrence High School, so I have a long history there, and I've also am a townie, and I feel very much that I'm passionate about the Lawrence story, and I feel very much that growing up near Haskell in the Breesedale neighborhood, it is Haskell and Native culture is so important to Lawrence, and it would be wonderful to see that reflected in the school district naming. I was very impressed and very excited when Carol approached me initially to tell me about this, what they were working on, and this project and this prospect, and I think that it fits in perfectly with the school district's commitment to diversity. I think the school district has not been afraid to address issues of diversity, has not been afraid to take on the conversations, even when they are difficult conversations. And as we have seen tonight, this is a conversation that is difficult, is a conversation that will continue to have difficulties. But on the flip side of that, what you are adding to the story of Lawrence is Billy Mills and the Billy Mills story. And it's a story that's so important to so many people and will create questions in the minds of other people who will then learn that story and continue on to weave the fabric of diversity in Lawrence and throughout town. So I really hope that you will consider it. I do believe that the diversity steps that you've already taken and the way that you're already going do dictate Billy Mills rather than Billy Mills South, because you've already made the choice, I think, to do the right thing and to embrace courageous conversations and diversity, even when it's difficult. And so even though it may not be easy to name it Billy Mills South, and it may create some difficult conversations, it is the right thing to do, and the right thing is not often easy, but you got to do it anyway. So thank you very much.
Cynthia, and Cynthia, I am, is it Courtney? Okay, thank you.
Also humbled to be up here speaking after all the words that have been shared before. Some of the things I have to share are rather light in nature and some are deep down to my bones. So I'm going to start with the ones on the lighter side because I think it's easier to start with those. So on the light side, I am not a Lawrence resident forever. I moved to the area in the past couple years. I have a 10-month-old son, and he will be an attendee at the middle school. When I first came here, I was trying to find my way around and trying to get to a friend's daughter's drama performance, and I got very, very confused because naming a school as Southwest and South is extremely confusing, and it's very easy to end up at one or the other. And I would ask you guys to also consider, what are people going to call this school? And to call something Billy Mills South, people are going to continue to call it South. There's a lot of inertia in that name. And I would argue that by calling it Billy Mills Middle School, you will ask people to use that name and to remember that name. And growing up in Northern Virginia and Reston, Virginia, I was lucky enough to attend a different Langston Hughes middle school, and I got to know Langston Hughes, and I got to study Langston Hughes and fall in love with his poetry because I went to that middle school. I went to a Rachel Carson, and I got to learn about naturalism, and I got to learn so much more just because of that name. Who we become is often who we look at, and I think this is an amazing opportunity for us to put that words in our mouths and in the mouths of students over and over and over again so that they can help remember this wonderful person. Also, kind of middling light note, I was one of the recipients of the survey that went out asking about the name change. And as someone who has an undergraduate business degree, as a veterinarian, as someone who does writing for marketing surveys now professionally, I was rather disappointed with the way that the survey was put together. The language in the survey was very leading. And I think if you guys are partially making your decision based on that survey, I would ask you to think about the way that survey was written very carefully, because almost every question I saw in there was led toward asking people to not rename the school. As someone whose son is going to be attending this school and someone who came from the East Coast, one of my concerns as a parent coming and moving out to Kansas is, what is diversity going to look like here? What kind of environment is my son going to grow up here? What is he going to learn here about being a good person? And I've loved the Lawrence community, and this has become our home. We're going to be staying here forever. But I would love, again, for us to embrace that opportunity for us to set a good example. When I came here and I learned about the bullying that had been going on to some of our Indigenous students, that was shocking and horrifying, and those are not the kind of values that I want my son to grow up with and to learn. And I think this is a great signal to our whole community and to those students that that's not something that would be acceptable in a school like Billy Mills Middle School. We forget sometimes that when we do not recognize diversity, it hurts all of us. And I just wanted to come up and say that. Thank you.
Our final audience member, Shannon Reed.
Hello. My name is Shannon Reed, and I am a graduate of South Junior High School, and I had the privilege of attending that school when Russell Blackbird was the principal, and he's one of the most impactful educators in my youth. I will always remember him, and probably the primary reason that I'll always remember him is because he is the person that I associate my beginning knowledge of local Indigenous culture, and then it spread from there. I knew from the beginning of 7th grade that our school was on land that was gifted to us by Haskell Indian Nations University. We had very regular field trips to Haskell for all kinds of things. I remember sitting in on classes, going to powwows. We were very connected to that campus culture. We were in each other's backyard. We were on the land that they gave us. And so that was really important and formative for me. And I'm lucky that I got to attend the school when he was the principal and when he was intentionally educating us about that history and about the land that we were coming to school on every day. So I am very much in support of this name change. I want to echo everybody else's comments that I really hope that South will just be let go, that there's no reason to keep it. It would literally just be an appeasement to people who are uncomfortable with change, and people need to be pushed into their discomfort because that is the only way that change actually happens. So South needs to be let go, and honoring Billy Mills as an important figure who has an impact on this community and continues to visit it as a home community of his, a home away from home, that's a huge deal, I think. I think it's a really important step to take. And finally, I wanted to read some words from a friend of mine who couldn't be here. He is a person of color who continues to teach me so much about so many things. And he couldn't be here tonight, but he shared these words with me, and I'm just going to read them verbatim because they're his words, not mine. And it's something that I need to educate myself more about this concept as well. If there is still a void in your understanding of the importance of representation, please reflect on the concept of symbolic annihilation. It's the principle, supported by data, that for young people in particular, representation translates to existence, literal existence. The omission of substantial cultural representation equates to erasure. And do we really want to be in the business of promoting white centrality on historically indigenous land instead of telling the stories that have not been told about the indigenous heroes that could empower generation after generation of people of color? I think not. Thank you.
My microphone keeps cutting out. That's the end of the audience participation forms. So thoughts, questions for our presenters or for staff? Kelly?
May I go? Thank you all who have come and presented. The tone has been so heavy, and this is a moment for joy. I hope that we can turn that around by the end of the evening. Community work is messy, and I know this hasn't been perfect. There have been missteps on the part of the board. There have been missteps, I'm sure, when you look and reflect upon your own work and how you might, if you had to do this again, how you might do it. Ultimately, this is such a great opportunity, and I can't believe someone hasn't thought of it before. So I really appreciate your bringing it to the board, and I am so proud to be a part of it, and hope that we're able to affirm this evening the Billy Mills Middle School name change. So that's where I'm at on the issue, and hope that we can move to a place of celebration.
I would just like to say that I'm supportive of the change to Billy Mills Middle School. We are absolutely aware that the survey was problematic, so don't worry about that. We figured that out pretty much right away. But thank you all for coming and speaking from your hearts and letting us hear your stories.
I'd like to thank the committee and all the time they put into working through this. I know it was a big group, and I would like to honor your choice.
And being transparent, I'm like, I appreciate the stories, I appreciate the knowledge, I appreciate the learning opportunity, but I'm like, why all these people coming? We know what we're gonna do. Billy Mills Middle School, you know, it seemed like almost effortless, but I can't speak.
You know, I appreciate the passion and the persuasiveness, I think the part for this where it flipped for me was when Austin talked about, well, we didn't name this Langston Hughes West, we named it Langston Hughes, and so that makes perfect sense. So I'm certainly supportive of Billy Mills Middle School.
Jim?
So I'll talk in the name of transparency. You know, when this process started, I wasn't on the board, and I think I may have offered money and baked goods and threats and all sorts of things to existing board members to deal with this before I got to sit up here. Clearly, that didn't work. And you know, as I sat through here, I think the first time most of you came and presented, I was sitting back in the back corner with Kelly, and I walked into that room thinking I don't get it. I don't understand. I don't know why the name needs to be changed. And I left that room thinking it doesn't matter what I think. If the name change can impact one student, if it can make a difference, then I think it needs to be done. You know, I will say, and I think like Rick, as a South parent, I can understand the need to leave South in the name. I will tell you, for me, it's more than a cardinal direction. Just like the one person who spoke who referred to the middle school as Central, just because that's what rolled off his tongue, because that's what he's used to, because for him it's not a cardinal direction, it's the name of a building. For me, it's not a cardinal direction, it's the name of a building.
Yeah, but that was the 80s, man. Sorry.
No, I'm not.
I wanted to date myself.
No, and I'm not. I'm simply saying, like Rick, I changed, and I'm in support of Billy Mills Middle School. But what I'm asking, because there's been some very poignant emails to the board that if we left South in the name, people would use it to be derogatory and would continue to call it South as a means to insult the Native American community. And what I'm asking is for you to give us time to get over rote memorization and just nature of what we call the building, because I've had 4 kids go through that building, and that is just what I call it, and it will take time to adjust. So if I sit on this rostrum and refer to it as South, please don't take it as an insult to the Native American community, because that is not what it is. But I support Billy Mills Middle School.
So I have a couple personal comments, and then I have a couple questions for staff and some things I want the board to just acknowledge for the community. Since the beginning, when this came up, I have supported the idea of changing the name. But in the interest of transparency, I will say I, more than anyone else on the board, have struggled with the policy implications of the choice. And I recognize that not everybody is going to agree with that, and that's okay. I'm a policy geek, as everybody up here knows, and I think process is important. I feel like this process, and this is, I will own this as a board member. It is not the community group's fault. I feel like this process has been far less than a shining example of a good process. I think our primary job as board members ought to be to craft good policy and then move forward, and we did not do that in this case. We kind of went fly by the seat of our pants, and I think that that was unfortunate both for the board and our staff and also for you, because it has created kind of this, I think it's probably contributed to some of the hard feelings that there are out there, that we didn't have we don't have a policy on renaming a facility. Our policy does not address it at all. And as a policy person who I feel that's the primary job of our board, first and foremost, besides making the decision about a superintendent, our job is to adopt policy and oversee its enforcement, and we did not do that in this case. And so, coming into tonight, the one thing that I knew for sure that I was going to say is that after this, we will be going through that exercise. We've already talked as a policy committee about, because one of the things that I did after the meeting in November, when you all were here, was to go out and do some looking at how other districts manage this process. And there are a lot of places that have much better defined ways of having this conversation, ways that it's better facilitated, ways that don't put staff members in positions that they shouldn't be in trying to manage a difficult conversation in our community. And so I think that we as a board have to do that work, and I'm sorry that we didn't do it before we got to this point this evening. I will freely admit I still have reservations about naming a building after a living person. I recognize the importance of that in the Native community, and I'm going to respect that. But I do think that our board needs to have a discussion about whether this is a choice that we make because of that particular aspect of Native culture, or is it a choice that we're going to make for any proposal that would come forward, because I don't think this is the last time that we will be asked to consider renaming a building, and so we need to have a real policy discussion about whether that is something that we are going to do every time that this comes up. So, yeah, Kelly.
I was just going to jump in and add, because we're talking now about procedure and policy a little bit, and I'm also, I think I'm equally nerdy, but maybe not. I think you might.
I think you are.
I'm pretty close.
Pretty close.
It would be really helpful to hear from you all that have been part of this process about what it was like for you, what you think we could have done better. You're like everything, but just to hear what it was for you. So if we could, I know that like. Carol, I know you've been at this for at least 365 days, but if we could just come back and get some feedback from you, it would be super helpful as we craft what that policy will look like. So thank you for sticking with it.
So before I conclude, there's a couple other things. One, I think the board does need to have a conversation if the decision is to go with Billy Mills Middle School. We have discussed previously that is a more costly choice to the district. And I have to acknowledge that there are a lot of people out there who have expressed to us concerns about a choice to spend money on that rather than other things. I think we need to work with our administration to understand that, to understand how we are going to manage those costs, and to be able to communicate that back to our community to address that concern. Because if we feel strongly that that's the right choice to make, that's the right choice to make, but we have to be able to respond to those concerns. So I'm going to acknowledge that those concerns are out there. The other thing that that does give me some pause, and this was not intentional on the part of our staff, but our board enclosure tonight did not indicate that we would be making a choice about the name that you have come to us and asked us to make. And I expect that we will, as a board, take some hits from people in our community for making that choice. And I want to acknowledge that. I want to say to the community that if that's the way that the board chooses to vote, which I believe it is, it wasn't handled this way in order to shut out people who might want to come and express a different opinion. I think that there will be people who feel that. And so I'm a little concerned about that. So I'm sorry, I know, I'm sorry. Yes, I understand, except that when people read the board enclosure and they think that we're going to be making a choice based on what's in it, and that's not the choice that we make, there may be some hard feelings about that. And I think that we have to acknowledge that as well. So yeah, one more thing to say. So given all of that, I am going to vote to support changing the name to Billy Mills Middle School. But I do want to emphasize that I'm doing it because I want to do the right thing for our students. And that, as much as I have struggled with this decision because of the policy concerns that I have about it, that is in the end, the thing that is going to cause me to vote yes on that, if that's the motion that gets made. So with that, Jessica?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on a couple things. Regarding cost, I think that we're going to have to work together as a community, as a group that has recommended this and has talked with us about fundraising and things like that. We had met and discussed the flooring, for example, in the gymnasium with anywhere where south is sort of inlaid, and it's going to be very expensive to replace that. Might not get replaced, and that might be something that we have to think about over a longer term period versus to keep the costs more manageable for us that we've already discussed.
Change that as time goes on.
Exactly. So signage in front of the building, of course, that would be something that we would be thinking about right away, and then uniforms and paperwork and all that sort of stuff will be on the regular cycle, which we'd already discussed. So I do think that there are ways to mitigate those costs and to think through that collectively as a community rather than that being something that we have to really answer for tomorrow. I personally am not afraid of the blowback. I know that people will email us and be upset. We've already gotten emails that people were upset that we were even considering any name change at all. So that is something that I am comfortable with. And so I guess I would just say that I understand some of your concerns. We've always kind of varied on the living person name, and I've heard arguments about this is just going to become a domino effect and all of our middle schools are want to change their names, and I'm not afraid of that either. So I guess what I would just say is you guys have made a really compelling case, and for multiple reasons, not just because it's about honoring a living person, and so for me, it's a no-brainer.
Can I add just one?
Yes.
There's something that was burning in my mind I wanted to mention. One of the things that we've been asked to do is to work on soft skills for our students, to begin to incorporate that in our teaching and in our curriculum. And I wanted to educate myself on Billy Mills a little bit more. I knew who he was, but I didn't know the detail. And I have to tell you, I read, and I hope, do you know, he went to work at 6 p.m. and got up at 6 a.m. in a grain mill. I'm from South Dakota. That's dangerous work. And he found 45 minutes to run a race, or to practice, every day, his running. I mean, that's just like one little thing you can, when I think about all the innovation that can come out of this name change, and one of the things I know about you that I've come to learn is how passionate you are about good quality education, and there's so much great creative change that's going to come from this single name change. So I'm just really excited to look at all those moments and celebrate Billy Mills.
And I think that we have to be very mindful of making sure that this is more than just changing the name on the building, because otherwise it doesn't do all the things that you want this to do. It has to be more than that. And I think the comment that one of the speakers made about being at the school when Mr. Blackbird was the principal, and the collaboration that happened with Haskell, that's really awesome and important stuff, and it doesn't happen anymore as far as I know. So we have to, it has to be, for this to be successful in this school community, it has to be more than just what the sign says on the building. So
I would add, as a South, soon to be Billy Mills, as a Billy Mills parent, that staff is some of the best staff that we have in this town, and I know some of them have been excited for this change, some of them have been trepidatious for this change, but once this change is made, they will do everything that they can to incorporate this into their curriculum and to make this work, because that's who they are as educators. And so I invite you to reach out to them as a staff and to work with Dr. Jones and to find a way to get into that building and to do what Shannon said, and to make this more than just a name change, to make this part of to move forwards and to make this part of the culture of that building, and see the change that we all hope this is.
And to Jessica's comment about the domino effect, I think that's exactly why we're going to push the policy discussion going forward from here, because I don't want to have the missteps that have been made in this process repeated. We need to come to some decision as a board about that. So.
Motion?
Yes. Is there anything else that anybody wants to say before we make the motion? No? Okay.
I just had the idea, and I know it's somewhat not relative, but the community to consider, and I'm not in any way bashing, negating, but we have on KU campus a building named after someone that's not even over 40, and everyone was supportive of that. So we need to take that into consideration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I move that we change the name of South Middle School to Billy Mills Middle School.
Second.
Dawn?
Beeson? Yes. Fincher?
Yes.
Gordon Ross? Ingram?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Mr. President, or Madam President, I think I've really got an appropriate comment to make. I really do. I didn't want to make this comment in my presentation, but we thank the board for the decision. But our research, to the best of our knowledge, we in this room and our community and the school board, we made history tonight. Our knowledge, our research indicates that there is no public school in America named in honor of a Native American, except now there will be in Lawrence, Kansas. Thank you.
Okay, we need a second to a motion to adjourn from Jessica. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you all for coming this evening. Good night.